There's just always a level of excitement on a university campus you really can't duplicate anywhere else. And then for the university, the resources that the Bush Foundation and Institute will be regularly bringing to the university will keep it a very live and vibrant institution far, far into the future.
Our hope for this temporary exhibit is to let folks know a little bit about what the Bush Center is, the partnership that makes up the Bush Center, what we are and what we will be in the future, and how we hope to be a resource for this community and beyond. And education is central to our mission, so I hope that people, when they come to this exhibit, will be reminded of some of the developments, some of the real momentous events of the Bush administration.
On September the 14th, I started my day with a combined FBI-CIA briefing, and then had a national security meeting, and then went to the National Cathedral for a National Day of Prayer. And then I flew to New York City to Ground Zero. I walked into what felt like hell. It was dark, soot in the air, water on the ground. I felt like I needed to make a statement, an impromptu statement, and Chief of Staff Andy Card suggested I crawl up on a piece of rubble. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a destroyed fire truck. And on top of the rubble was a fireman named Bob Beckwith, and he helped me up on top of the pile. An advanced person, Nina Bishop, had found a bullhorn to make sure that my words were projected. I started off with some what I thought were soothing comments, and some guy in the back yelled, "I can't hear you." And I said, "Well, I hear you." And from there flowed the statement.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Some of my favorite artifacts in the collection are the most popular ones, I suppose. But the letters from children are always, I think, very enjoyable and certainly reflect not only the innocence and the inquisitiveness of children, but also the personal characteristics of the President and First Lady.
This was a letter from a little girl whose dad was in the military, and she wrote George, and she said, "Dear President, as much as I don't want my dad to fight, I'm willing to give him to you." And she said she prayed and she cried for all the people that had died, and even though she's sad, she'll still try to help. And then she ended it with, "I hope one day everyone will get along."
We get a lot of letters from the families, and which was part of forging a special bond. Laura and I felt a kinship with the families of our troops, and their letters to us were incredibly profound, and many times they expressed the pride of a son or a daughter, or husband or wife who died. Oftentimes they'd say, "Mr. President, don't abandon the sacrifice of our loved one." The Comforter-in-Chief became comforted when I would meet with the families of the fallen and or read their letters.
It's hard to really pick a favorite here, but one of mine is the baseball that the President threw out in the Game 3 of the World Series in 2001. I think we all remember that when he walked out to the pitcher's mound and threw a perfect strike, by the way, with that baseball. We have that here, along with the jacket he wore and the pitching rubber from the mound. We even have that in this exhibit from that night.
The New York Yankees asked me to come and throw out the first pitch for the third game of the World Series, which was being played in Yankee Stadium. Secret Service was a little nervous about me standing in front of such a huge crowd shortly after 9/11. But I thought it was important to help rally the spirits of the New Yorkers, and the country for that matter.
The crowd was yelling, "USA, USA, USA." I was very nervous about the evening, and not because I was afraid George would bounce the pitch, but just because it was so shortly after the terrorist attacks.
I got on the mound, and the electricity was unbelievable. The crowd was chanting. The catcher looked like he was a mile away. The baseball felt like a shot put. And so I wound up and hurled it. It went over the plate, and the crowd went wild. It was a great moment.
Mrs. Bush had such an important role, and certainly that is reflected here and will be in the permanent exhibit and in the programming at the Future Library. And of course, her focus on women's issues and women's freedom around the world, particularly in Afghanistan, those issues will most definitely be reflected.
In October of 2007, I went on a trip to Saudi Arabia. I met with many breast cancer survivors in Saudi Arabia, and they presented me with this veil like they wear. But this one, as you can see, is covered with the pink ribbon that means to everyone in the United States breast cancer awareness and breast cancer research. It was a very moving trip. I would have never expected it, but there was an intimacy about being able to talk about breast cancer with women in these 3 Arab countries that let me get sort of behind the veil.
We have an example of some of the wonderful gifts the President received from heads of state, including Mrs. Bush received a great jewelry set from Saudi Arabia that is just phenomenal, and that will be in this temporary exhibit as well. So if you really want to understand the events, the developments, the issues that the President dealt with, how he made decisions, come look at the archives. That's where you learn the real story.